Missile is in our gun sight.
Fire!
Fire!
They cut the deaths of the bridge crew out entirely and told American kids those characters were just knocked out. Star Blazers didn't just edit a few scenes. The American version systematically removed the permanent consequences of war from a show that was built entirely around them. We're going to show you exactly what they erased, moment by moment, scene by scene. Captain Avatar's final moments were altered. The destruction of an entire alien civilization was softened into something that looked like a tactical retreat. And at the end of Series 1, the scene where multiple beloved crew members didn't make it, that scene became so watered down that the emotional gut punch the Japanese creators had built toward simply ceased to exist for an entire generation of American kids. The bridge crew scene is coming. When we get there, you'll understand exactly what was taken from you and why it mattered. Let's go back to where this all started. What the show really was. In 1979, when Star Blazers arrived on American television, it looked like a fairly standard science fiction cartoon. Space battles, brave heroes, a ticking clock. Earth was dying from alien bombardment. The crew of the Argo had 1 year to cross the galaxy and bring back a cure. And every episode ended with a day counter reminding you exactly how little time was left. That countdown device alone set it apart from almost every other cartoon on the air. Most of them reset entirely between episodes, like nothing had ever happened. Network executives and parents saw something safe. Kids were already watching Battle of the Planets and Voltron. Space adventure was the genre of the moment, and Star Blazers fit neatly into that category, at least on the surface. It had the ships, it had the uniforms, it had the kind of earnest heroism that made it easy to slot into a Saturday morning lineup without asking too many questions. What they missed, or chose not to look too hard at, was that this wasn't just an adventure show. It was a war story, a real one.
In the mid-21st century, the mysterious planet Gamalon.
The reality. The Japanese original, Space Battleship Yamato, first aired in 1974, and it was a fundamentally different piece of work. It wasn't dressed up as children's entertainment. It was an unflinching look at what war actually costs. Not in strategy or tactics, but in human beings. The show took that question seriously in a way that almost nothing in American animation had attempted. Characters died permanently, without being walked back in the next episode or explained away in a throwaway line. The violence had weight. The grief had weight. When someone was gone, they stayed gone, and the show didn't apologize for it or soften the edges after the fact. That permanence was the whole point. The series earned its emotional stakes by making them real. The original version showed explicit physical signs of Captain Okita, who became Avatar for American audiences, deteriorating in the final stretch of the series, including blood, as his body gave out from the strain of leading the mission. The homeworld of the Gamalon enemy didn't get strategically abandoned. It broke apart. The implication was mass death on a civilizational scale. In the landscape of 1974 Japanese animation, this was Apocalypse Now on Saturday morning. Except nobody put that on the box. The gap. American broadcast standards in the late 1970s and early 1980s operated on a fairly blunt principle. Children's programming was not the place for death, blood, or permanent consequences. Network censors didn't debate artistic merit or weigh the narrative purpose of a scene. They reached for the scissors. Somewhere in a production office in 1979, someone watched the original Yamato footage and started making a list. Blood, cut. Visible injuries, soften. Characters dying on screen, they're just knocked out. An entire civilization destroyed? Let's say they evacuated. The decisions weren't malicious. They came from a specific theory of what children should and shouldn't see, and that theory had scissors. That bridge crew scene is still coming. But first, let's go through what they actually changed, piece by piece, in the order it happened. The censored moments. Number 1. The scrubbing of blood and physical reality. In the American Star Blazers broadcast, the violence in space combat was kept intentionally vague. Ships exploded, enemies were repelled, heroes sustained damage. But the bodies, the physical reality of what combat actually does to human beings, were almost entirely absent from the frame. You knew the battles were serious because the music told you so. not because anything you saw made it undeniable. The original space battleship Yamato didn't sanitize combat injuries. When characters were hurt, you saw it. The gritty physicality of what it means to be in a war, not a video game simulation of one, but an actual war, was present throughout the series. Injuries were shown. Blood was shown. The cost of each battle registered on the characters' bodies, not just in the dramatic score swelling underneath them. It wasn't gratuitous, it was honest. In a story that was asking its audience to understand what sacrifice truly meant, the physical evidence of that sacrifice carried real narrative weight. Removing it didn't make the show safer, it made it less coherent. The heroism started to feel weightless when you couldn't see what it was costing. Did you ever notice as a kid that the Star Force always seemed oddly intact after battles that should have destroyed them? That wasn't resilience. The evidence was edited out before it reached you. Number 2. Deslock's Survival, a philosophical edit. In Star Blazers, Deslock, the commanding theatrical leader of the Gamalon Empire, remained a recurring presence across multiple seasons. For American audiences, his continued appearances were simply part of the show's ongoing world. He was a great villain, and great villains tend to stick around. In the original Japanese space battleship Yamato, Deslock was presumed dead at the close of the first series. His fate was handled as a definitive ending. The war's leader falls, the war ends, the cost is paid. That finality was intentional. It carried the weight that wartime stories need to feel true. The choice to keep Deslock alive for American audiences wasn't just a continuity decision. It was a philosophical one. When an antagonist survives something he shouldn't, it quietly signals to the audience that the world of this story doesn't operate on permanent consequences, that the things which look fatal are actually recoverable. It's the same instinct that drove every other softening in the adaptation. Death has meaning because it's final. Revive the villain, and you've quietly argued that nothing is really final. Every Saturday morning cartoon villain who somehow kept coming back, here it wasn't lazy writing. It was a deliberate choice made by people who had decided the audience wasn't ready for endings. Number 3. The Gamalon Homeworld. Evacuation versus extinction. In the American broadcast, the fate of the Gamalon homeworld, the planet of the civilization that had been bombarding Earth into near extinction for years, was handled in a way that softened the full weight of what the original depicted. The framing leaned toward retreat, toward something survivable. The enemy was defeated, the threat was over. You could feel okay about the outcome. The original Japanese version showed the Gamalon homeworld breaking apart. The visual implication wasn't ambiguous. This was civilizational scale loss. Mass casualties, the end of a people as a people. The enemy wasn't just defeated, their world was gone, and the show held the camera on that. This is where the original Yamato was doing something genuinely sophisticated for its era, and genuinely rare in animation at any era. It wasn't presenting a clean hero's victory. It was presenting the tragedy embedded inside every war. That the winning side's triumph comes at catastrophic cost to someone on the other side. That's not a comfortable thing to build into a story for children, which is precisely why someone changed it. It's the Bambi's mother of Saturday morning world building, except they didn't just cut the scene, they replaced it with something that let you keep feeling uncomplicated about the outcome. Whoa. Number 4. Captain Avatar's death. What they left out. Captain Avatar's death was one of the moments Star Blazers actually kept. American audiences did watch their commander, the weathered, stoic heart of the Star Force, pass away. By the standards of American children's animation in 1979, that alone was remarkable. Most shows of that era didn't kill their leads. They reassigned them. They wrote them off to other missions. They faded them out. Star Blazers let its captain die on screen. And that decision deserves real credit. What the American version removed was the texture of that death. The original Japanese version of Captain Okita's final moments included explicit physical signs of deterioration, blood from his nose and mouth as his body finally gave out from the accumulated cost of leading the mission across the galaxy. The death in the original wasn't just implied or suggested or softened into symbolism. It was shown with the same unsparing visual honesty the series had applied to everything else. Removing those details doesn't erase the fact that he died, but it changes what the death feels like. In the original original, his passing carried the full physical weight of what it means for a body to finally fail, the same weight the series had been building across the whole run. For American audiences, that was cleaned up. The emotional beat remained, but the rawness was gone. They trusted American kids enough to let the character die. They just didn't trust them enough to see what dying actually looks like. That's a very specific kind of half measure, and it tells you a lot about what the broadcasters thought they were protecting.
Missile is in our gun sight.
Fire!
Fire!
Number 5. Anchor Moment. The Bridge Crew. The deaths that became naps. In the American Star Blazers version of the Series 1 finale, the Argo takes heavy damage during the climactic battle against the Gamalon Empire. Several bridge crew members, people the audience had followed, cared about, and rooted for across a full season of continuous storytelling, appear to be incapacitated by the damage. The ship is battered. The battle is won. And then the American broadcast version tells you, they're knocked out. Badly hurt, maybe, but they're going to be okay. That is not what happened in the original. In Space Battleship Yamato, multiple primary bridge crew members did not make it through the final battle. They were gone, permanently, without reversal, without a recovery scene to soften the blow. In a story that had spent an entire season building toward the idea that saving the world requires paying a price you cannot take back, the original Japanese finale delivered on that premise completely. The victory cost real lives. Lives the audience had spent 26 episodes coming to know. This is the edit that matters more than any other, because it isn't just a trimmed moment or a softened scene, it is the erasure of the show's entire argument. Space Battleship Yamato was constructed around a single, honest premise, that war's cost is human, permanent, and cannot be wished away or negotiated into something more comfortable. Every episode leading to the finale was building toward the moment that would make that premise undeniable. For American audiences, that moment was quietly swapped out for a recovery room that the story hadn't earned and didn't need. The original creators spent a full season asking one question: what does it actually cost to save the world? American broadcasters answered that question differently. It costs a brief hospitalization. You watched these characters grow. You knew their names. You knew what each of them did on that ship, why they mattered, what they'd been through. And then the version that reached you said they were fine. Because somewhere, someone decided that the answer the story had been building toward was simply too much for an American kid to sit with on a Tuesday afternoon. That's not protection. That's the story, broken at the moment it was supposed to mean the most.
What's the matter, Derek?
The legacy. There's a specific kind of recalibration that happens when you find out a story you loved was actually a different story than the one you thought you were watching. Not a worse story, necessarily, just not the full one. A version of it. An edited print. Star Blazers wasn't a lie. The American version was still a genuinely remarkable piece of television. Bold by the standards of its era, willing to maintain real continuity and real narrative stakes in a landscape where cartoons reset completely every single episode. That was unusual, and it mattered. A lot of the emotional power that Star Blazers had for its audience came through cleanly, even in the edited form. But the original Space Battleship Yamato was asking something harder of its audience. It was asking young viewers to understand that the things genuinely worth fighting for require people to pay prices they cannot undo. That's not a nihilistic message. It's the most honest thing a war story can say, and the original trusted its audience to hear it. The censorship tells you something real about 1979. American broadcasters weren't operating out of contempt for the material or the audience. They were operating from a specific theory of childhood, a belief that certain truths should be delayed, that the finality of death and the physical reality of violence were things best encountered gradually, on a schedule adults got to control. There was genuine care in that instinct. The result just happened to be a diminished story. What got lost is something the Japanese creators understood from the start. Children can absorb more than we give them credit for. When a story tells the truth, even a hard truth, the response isn't damage. It's depth. The kids who watched the unedited Yamato in Japan weren't broken by those bridge crew deaths. They were moved. They understood, at whatever age they happened to be, that the story meant what it was saying. The version that reached American kids in 1979 meant most of it, but not all of it. And the part that was held back was the part where the whole story had actually been sitting the entire time. The show you watched was real. The show they made was just a little braver than the one that reached you. Star Blazers was a genuinely exceptional piece of television. Serialized, emotionally ambitious, willing to take its audience seriously in ways almost nothing else on American broadcast was doing in 1979. That legacy is real, and it holds up. The show moved a lot of people, and it earned that. But the original space battleship Yamato was something more than that. It was a story that understood sacrifice as a permanent thing, that depicted it as such, and that trusted the people watching to carry the weight of that honestly. The American version protected you from the full cost of the story you were watching. Whether that protection made it better or worse is a question worth sitting with, because the answer might tell you something about yourself, not just the show. Which of these moments hit you hardest? The bridge crew? Avatar's final scene? The Gamalon homeworld? Tell me in the comments. I want to know what you actually remember seeing. The Argo is still out there, and now you know what she was really carrying.